Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to this discussion of best practices in marketing, promotion, and reader engagement. This is the latest installment of Business Boot Camps for Writers, brought to you by the Authors Guild Foundation, with support from the National Endowment for the Arts, Penguin Random House, and our donors. Hello to all the Authors Guild members in the audience, and a warm welcome to those of you who are not yet members. You can find out more about us at authorsguild.org. Thank you so much to our panelists, Dana Kay, Leela Siddiqui, Vaishali Nayak, for being here to share your wisdom with us. Thank you to our audience, especially those of you who submitted questions ahead of time. Those help shape the content of tonight's event. Good to know what you want to hear about, but additional questions can be posed in the Q&A box below. We'll be watching that, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, but we'll get to some toward the end, we promise. We just ask that you're courteous and respectful, and we ask that you do not solicit the panelists for personal feedback or requests to get your manuscript submitted, that sort of thing. Finally, there's a closed caption subtitle button if you'd like to follow along with captions. And now we'll go ahead and turn it over to the wonderful moderator, Jane Friedman. This is the fourth boot camp that Jane has hosted with us in this series. We're so glad to have her back. Jane writes and publishes The Hot Sheet, an industry newsletter for authors. And if you've ever Googled something about writing or publishing, you've probably become familiar with janefriedman.com. Jane, thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. It's a delight to be here again with the Authors Guild and with our panelists. I'm going to just briefly introduce each of you, and I'm sure more details about your experience are going to come out as we go. So first, we have Dana Kay with Kay Publicity, a boutique PR company that she founded in 2009. She's the author of 2 books, Your Book, Your Brand, as well as the Personal Brand Workbook. And I'm looking forward to Dana's advice on branding later on. Vaishali Nayak is currently a senior marketing manager at HarperCollins Children's Books, who's worked on marketing and social media campaigns with award-winning and best-selling novels. And before HarperCollins, she was with Scholastic. Leela Siddiqui is currently a marketing manager at Simon & Schuster after beginning her career at Penguin Random House. She's also an author, and her debut novel just published in September, that's House of Glass Hearts. All right, so we're going to dig right in. I would like to start with kind of offering folks a lay of the land, the timeline for book marketing and publicity. So a book is signed or contracted. I'm hoping you'll walk me through the marketing, promotion, and publicity timeline or life cycle for that book from your particular perspective. When does your work officially start? What are the milestones and things authors need to know about a traditional publishing timeline in particular? And Leela, I'm hoping you would start us off here.
Sure, happy to. And thanks everyone for joining us. So pretty much, I would say my work starts a year before publication. So this is when we're starting to position our titles for our seasonal sales conferences. Right now, SNS, we're about to start planning for spring 2023, which is a crazy year to even think about, but we're starting to plan in the next couple of months. So before editors go into sales conference to present their titles, we as marketers start by laying out a basic marketing plan and a budget, and we set a few pie in the sky goals for the book. No idea is a dumb idea. But one of the first important milestones is when galleys are printed, say 6 to 8 months prior to publication, sometimes sooner, which is great. That's when we start implementing our plans. So now we're going back and we're revisiting our earlier plans, building upon them, revising them if necessary, seeing if our budget still holds. And then we start by getting the galleys out. So that's a really important milestone, is when galleys come in. Usually, but at that point, the whole team, the editor, the marketer, the publicist, we meet with the author and the agent, and we usually have our big, sit down. These are our, marketing and publicity plans. This is what you can expect as in the run up to publication. From there, marketing usually works with a shorter lead time. So it's likely 3 months prior to publication where you have a really good idea of what the campaign is going to look like, what sort of advertising there will be. And then that last month before publication is also when publicity begins to shape up. Personally, as a marketer, I like to see what's happening with the publicity because it also informs what I'm going to do with the campaign, with the latter part of the campaign. So depending on where the reviews and coverage are coming from, I can tweak the campaign based on that. That last month before publication is very update heavy and can probably be exhausting for an author, but it's a good kind of exhausting. And then of course, after that, the all important milestone, publication day. For some authors, that day can be, unusually quiet because it's just been so loud in the 4 weeks leading up to publication. Everything we've planned has already been, put in motion up to this day. But, you can expect more updates to come in and more campaign optimizations to come in after publication.
Excellent. Thank you for giving us a grounding there. Vishali, is there anything you would add to that or highlight, especially from a children's publishing perspective, if anything might be different there?
Sure. I think, to build off everything Leela said, I think it varies. That's all correct. I also think it varies a little bit house to house. Every house has like their own timeline and process of how they do things. For example, at Harper, the first time like marketing hears about a book is like, at launch, which is like a big event where editors come and kind of like do show and tell for everything that they're planning for, like, the year ahead or years ahead. Usually it's well in advance. And then after that, we'll have breakout meetings where we'll discuss kind of like a little bit deeper into like what the stories are with editorial. So they'll let us know, like, this is a little bit more info about the author, a little bit more info about the book. So then we can kind of get the gears turning about what we think our marketing plans will look like. And then internally, we have a couple more meetings where we discuss things with sales. So we have like sales conference and things like that. So within that timeline too, we get more and more info about the book. Usually the manuscript becomes available and we start reading it internally. Galleys get printed, and we kind of figure out like, this is like what the story is. This is how best to position it and what our marketing plan will look like. And then we like to lock in our marketing plans like pretty early in terms of like advertising, especially since a lot of advertising tends to run over like a large period of time. There's the pre-pub window. So we want to make sure that we're targeting, trade accounts, getting booksellers and like librarians, like, buzzed about the books and things like that. So we'll have different events like festival, or not festivals, but like, different like industry events where we'll be giving out galleys, any promos and materials or tchotchkes that we make with the book. And then eventually that all feeds into, like the on sale moment. So that will be like the time where consumers really find out about the book. And we really make a big splash there. And then of course, we like to make sure everything is long tail. So just carrying on those promotions afterwards as well. So there's really like a long lifespan for the book. And we kind of find out bits and pieces like a little bit over time. So it really like builds into like a bigger campaign to best suit the book.
Now, Dana, before I shoot over to you for your perspective as a publicist who assists authors with this process, I wonder if Leela or Vishali, if you can comment on what's the best way for an author to influence your plans in a good way. Like, is there a particular moment when you really want to hear from them? What do you suggest?
So definitely, sorry. So definitely knowing, what sort of relationships they already have. Do they already have media relationships? Do they already have influencer relationships? Are they cozy with other authors in their genre? What organizations are they a part of? These are a lot of questions we ask right away. And usually we have our authors fill out a pretty lengthy author questionnaire. And this serves both publicity and marketing because there's media contacts in there, but there's also, other marketing related contacts. And it's very important. And I love to think of, my campaign as a sort of collaboration with my authors. I want to work with them and, always make sure that they're comfortable with our plans as well. As far as outreach is concerned, because, we want to partner with organizations that they're close to. We want to make sure the author is okay with us being very book promoting there.
And Vishali, do you have something to add?
No, I agree. I think it definitely helps to connect with authors like pre-pub. I would say usually like 3 months before like the book comes out tends to be like a sweet spot, because that way, we can start thinking about like if there's any particular social promotions that you're planning to launch around on sale, we can partner. If there's anything you're doing on social, we'd love to know ahead of time, so that way we can keep an eye out for it, amplify it on our social channels. I think it also just helps to just like chat frequently. Like I said, there's a lot of pre-pub promotions happening. So for example, if your publisher is doing like an art giveaway and they're posting about it on social, it's great for you to like repost that just to keep like engagement going. So that way, the audience kind of like knows like the book is coming out and you're kind of holding hands throughout the process. Also, if you're planning like any sort of special content, if you're like writing like a blog post or things like that, we'd love to know about that, because that's something that we can then repurpose and share on our channels as well. So I think like anything creative you're doing, like let us know, because then we can help advise. There also might be moments where we're already doing something, so we can just let you know that we're taking care of that. So that way we're not doubling up on efforts. So just kind of like, keeping everyone in the loop. I think if there's anything also that like, you want your marketing team to like amplify, it's great to like let your editor know, so then they can like give us the heads up and we can make sure that, we're getting the word out.
Excellent. So Dana, I would love for your perspective on this as a publicist that authors hire to help to support the publisher's efforts and their own efforts. When do you like to be brought in? What sort of lead time do you want to have?
Yeah. So as an independent publicist, we always want to work lockstep with the in-house team. And so a lot of our efforts will coincide with publicists and marketers like Leela and Vaishali. And so, but however, I think that you can, when we have galleys available is really when like the rubber hits the road, is because it's really hard to get media coverage without any books to send. So sometimes authors will contact us a year in advance, which is great because then we can get them in our calendar, but we actually won't start until about 6 months in advance. And all of that lead time has to do with the journalists. For pitching monthly magazines or trade outlets, they're right now working on their summer issues. So we want to get in at the right time so that everything hits around launch. I'd say the only exception might be with some nonfiction authors. Lisa Rogers in the Q&A asked about the difference with fiction and nonfiction. And for some nonfiction authors, typically for nonfiction, you've sold the book because you already have a platform, not because you're building one from scratch. However, a lot of nonfiction authors may be very well known in their very small community or their small field, but maybe don't have the broad audience reach yet. So in those cases, we might start laying the foundation a little bit earlier to build up their newsletter, to get them some thought leadership pieces, and to get them more well-known with mainstream media. So I think that would be the only difference, is that for a nonfiction author who already has all the connections, is already in media frequently, same lead time. But if it's an author who maybe it's a professor who sold a book based on their academic credibility, but isn't well known to like the masses, we might start a little bit early with placing some op-eds or pitching them as an expert on television shows so that people can be familiar with them way in advance of publication.
So you've all mentioned advanced review copies or galleys, ARCs, whatever you call them, the books that are available about 6 to 9 months out. Obviously, COVID has affected some of this, and I know that maybe digital galleys have been more prevalent. Is there anything about that process that's changed that authors need to know about?
I mean, I think the best thing, there's been a lot of silver linings in publishing. Like there's been a lot of silver linings about this period, and one of them is that people have gotten used to virtual events like these. And the other is people have gotten used to digital galleys. So if you think about a lot of journalists, many of them living in New York with small apartments, they don't want print books filling up their tiny studios. And so a lot more people got used to digital galleys, to the point where we used to feel like that was such a roadblock when the publisher said, we're not printing galleys and we can only have a PDF. And that's no longer the case. We actually, when we get galleys from the publishers, we used to request anywhere from 40 to 60. We're now only using maybe 15 or 20 because so many people want ebooks.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about collaboration with the publisher. I'm wondering if, we'll start with you, Dana. Are there any big mistakes or misconceptions you think authors have, especially, coming in, having maybe not worked with a traditional publisher or a publicist before? What do you normally have to tell them that they might not already know?
Well, I think I'm eager to hear the in-house team's thoughts on this, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I think a few of the big ones are that, while there's a different dynamic, obviously, between an outside person that the author is hiring, right? Like, my loyalty is to you, whereas the in-house team works for the publisher. And while our goals are very much the same, we want to get the book out there, we want to, get the author out there and sell as many books as possible. They don't have the bandwidth to do everything that your hearts desire. There's a limited amount of time and a lot of books. And so when you hire an outside publicist, we may have some more bandwidth to do more creative things, or more helping you more hands-on. So like, we manage a lot of our clients' newsletters. The publisher typically isn't going to do that for you. And so I think there's a misconception about like what the in-house team's role versus an outside person's role. And then another thing is that, as much as we're there to help, a lot more hands-on, I sometimes get authors who are like, I have my vision, these are the outlets I want pitched, this is this. And you actually don't want that. You want to hire an agency that helps with strategy. And like, I always say, you're hiring us for our brains, not for our hands. And so I think authors who have a very clear vision of what they want executed and know how to execute it and can do all those things, you'd save a lot of money by getting a VA, a virtual assistant, instead to execute those plans. And so I think that you're hiring an outside publicist to be a strategic partner and do a lot of the more creative things or more integrative things that the in-house teams just might not have the bandwidth to do.
That's a really useful tip, because I do meet authors who know exactly what they want to see done and they just want someone to do it.
Right. If you know how to do it, you can train a VA, and you just don't have the time. You can train an assistant to do those things. I had an author just give me a list of all the podcasts she wanted with their contact information. I'm just like, that's great. Happy to contact many of them. But like, if you know this, then like, there's a lot of other things. You could have been spending your time doing other things rather than like doing podcast research. That's what we do.
Leela, is there something you would like authors to know to make the relationship more productive?
Yeah, so the thing is that as a marketer working at, a big 5, or I guess a big 4, big 5, we don't know yet. It's that I have other titles I'm working on at the same time as yours. I'm sorry to break your heart, but it's just the truth. I have maybe 25 titles a year I'm working on, and do the math seasonally, to break it up. And I think that, to Dana's point, it's really great if like working with an outside publicist or even marketer, because they are very tuned into you and they're able to sort of, think outside the box, because sometimes we can be constrained by, the limits that are placed on us within our publishing house. I love you, Simon & Schuster, but I'm just saying, like, that can happen. I have had some very, very entrepreneurial authors who already have a list, who are already, hitting the ground running. They're doing their own networking and they're bringing the marketing and publicity to us, which is amazing. And I think that that's really important for authors to know. Sometimes, when I'm doing my outreach to, say, a bookstagrammer or an organization to pitch them the book, for review or for an interview or something, I get crickets, but sometimes when my authors do it, they're hearing back from nearly everyone. And it's because they're coming to this organization or this bookstagrammer or this influencer as an author themselves, whereas I'm this bureaucratic person, sending them this email from this cold void, they're like, I'm going to file that away. But when it's coming from the author, there's just something about that pitch that really resonates with people. And so, authors should know that they don't have to fully rely on us to do the work for them. Like I said, I like to look at my campaigns as a collaboration with the author. Sometimes it goes a really long way when the authors do some of their own outreach. Not that they have to do all the work, but I do often see that their rate of hearing back is more than mine.
So I actually find that somewhat counterintuitive for some authors who might feel like they don't have skills pitching, or they might not, know what they're doing when they're trying to get media attention, and maybe they don't realize the leverage they have with their existing relationships. So that maybe I'll go ahead and segue into one of our next issues, which is some of the early like brand building and platform building, regardless of genre, things that authors can do that are going to make the marketing and promotion a smoother ride or more successful. So let's say an author is really confident they're going to have a book coming out, but it's really 2 or 3 years from now. There's no pre-order page, there's no certain title, no cover. What can they do that would be meaningful for that release to give them a better foundation for that launch? And, Leela, you've mentioned some things here about relationships and knowing certain people. That sounds super helpful. Of course, that begs the question of how do you get those relationships in the first place? So Dana, I'm going to scoot over to you to lead us off here.
Sure. I think if you have I'm going to say this, if you have a book contract, like if a book is under contract, or you've decided to go the self-publishing route where you have a path to publication, that's when I would start really establishing like what your author brand is, like who you are and what you write. The reason I say it's important to wait till you have a book contract is because you need to know how it's being positioned with your publisher. I've had a couple instances where an author thought they wrote a YA novel, but it was an adult novel, or vice versa. And so it's important to really be clear on what the publication is going to look like. But I think getting clear on, updating creating an author bio, loading your website with messaging that's on brand, meaning like that it has your bio, your photo. If you don't have a cover yet, you can include, the publisher's launch announcement or the marketing copy that you have. And then also just getting your online house in order in general, especially if you're a debut, securing the right social media platforms, getting your newsletter software set up. There's never too early to start gathering emails. The earlier, the better. You'll get a lot more traction come pub day. So I think that in advance, it's just a really great time to get your online house in order, because you don't want to do that closer to pub when you're also doing guest blogs or interviews or all these other things. And then I also think to take this is a little bit more introspective, just to take some time and like really think about what your goals are for the launch. I always ask potential clients in a call, like, envision your publication, your launch week. What would you love to see happen? And so many of them don't know. They don't know what to expect. I'm like, just dream big. What do you want to see happen? And so even just start to envisioning like what you want to happen, and then thinking about, okay, if I want to sit on the couch with Oprah on Super Soul Sunday or whatever, like every author does, what do I need to put in place now to potentially make that happen? So get dreamy.
Vishali, for children's authors, is it the same dynamic that Dana's talking about? How does it change since, sometimes on social, you might, if you're a children's picture book author, you might not be talking directly to children, but to parents or educators.
Right. No, I think it's really important as a children's author to like know your audience, because like you said, if you're a picture book audience, or if you're a picture book author, you're going to be talking to parents and grandparents. Whereas if you're middle grade, you're also very interested in like talking to educators who might be looking for teaching materials to have in their classrooms. So I think and like, YA is like a whole different sphere. You'll have to be like plugged into like Twitter a little bit more and things like that. So I feel like once you know your audience, you can also find out where they live, and you can kind of start working backwards and figuring out your social media strategy. And to Dana's point, I think it's really important to do a tune-up of your online presence. So that can include everything from kind of, having a refresh of your author website. It's really important to have not only like an author photo, but like a credit. So if someone wants to use your photo, they can know like what the photo credit is. If you are, if you think your book has like educational tie-ins, it's great to have like an educator resources section, for example. So it becomes like a one-stop shop for anyone who's looking for, some FAQ about your book, any teaching materials that might be coming along like down the pipeline, and, so on. It's also just a great place to make sure that, like, you know, you're linking all your social media profiles, and making sure like those are updated as well. And my general rule is with social media is that you should never feel forced to feel like, you know, you have to be on every single platform. I think at the end of the day, it's really important to be on the platforms that you feel like you can engage with most like authentically and like naturally, because I feel like that's the content that will really resonate with readers. And I think that's like such a great space to start, you know, using that like space to like start promoting your book. Readers love behind the scenes content. So if you're like unboxing your arc, or, you know, sharing like info about like an Easter egg, or, you know, anything along those lines, that's really interesting content for everyone to see, because like not everyone gets to experience that. So I think, you know, you can start sprinkling in those like gems as well. And then other than that, I just recommend just making sure like, you know, all your buy links are updated as well. Um, a really easy thing to do, for example, is like, you know, if you're on Twitter and you know your book is coming out, just pin a tweet to like the top of your profile that includes like buy links to your publisher page, but also like indie bookshops. You can do like IndieBound or bookshop.org, and like a brief book bio and like a cover. So that way, if anyone is visiting your page immediately, they know what you're doing. They can see like, you know, the book info. I also recommend like, you know, including that in your bios and making sure those are updated with the latest info. So that way, you know, as people start getting interested and you start building your brand, it's really simple for everyone to kind of follow along. And there's like a lot of tiny little things that authors can do, but in general, I think it's a great time to sort of like start tuning up.
So Vishali, I want to go back to something you said a little bit
Yes.
earlier that I know that authors are, we have so many questions about this generally at every
Yeah.
single marketing session. They want to be told where to find their readers on social media. And you mentioned, you know, to try and reverse engineer it, that once you know where your readers are, you know, you can go there.
Right.
And you mentioned YA and Twitter as being a natural fit. Are there any more gems like that you can offer to give people direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like different places for different things. Like, for example, like if you're in middle grade and you want to start engaging more with like middle grade authors, for example, there's like certain hashtags you can follow, like MG Lit, and it's a great way to kind of figure out, you know, who other like authors are, not only like within your publishing house, but within other houses that you can kind of engage with and learn with and help each other like signal boost your content, especially if your books are coming around the same time. I think, you know, they tend to be a fantastic community, and I feel like, you know, people can look there. In terms of other content, I feel like, you know, with social media, things are constantly evolving. Like right now, TikTok is like the space. So I think right now, you know, a lot of TikTok tends to focus on YA content, but that like is slowly shifting to other pieces as well. So I really think you have to like poke around, see what kind of content already exists. I highly recommend like looking at what other authors are doing. Like, for example, I think like Victoria Aveyard is like fantastic on TikTok. Erin Trotta Kelly is like fantastic on all her social media platforms. So it's great to have those as examples too. And you can kind of, you know, see what everyone is doing and then kind of pick and choose what works best for you personally, and then, you know, make that happen. But it's constantly evolving. I wish I had a cheat sheet that said like, oh, for this platform, go here, but it's usually changing. But yeah, you know, usually you can kind of like get the gist if you like poke around a little bit.
Since we've now broached the social media topic, I'll continue with that. And I'll ask Leela, how much guidance are you offering authors on this? Do you basically, you know, let them figure it out on their own, since it's so individual and personal, one's use? And I'm also wondering if an author has like a teensy following, you know, a few hundred on Twitter or wherever, do you want them to be focused on building that up, or are there other things they should be doing? You know, everyone's so anxious about this. So what do you say?
Well, you know, it's really dependent on the author. So, you know, what I like to do is I like to gauge their comfort levels. You know, most of the authors I've worked with would like some guidance on social media, and I'm always happy to provide that. So what I like to do is, you know, create like a social media timeline for them, and, you know, break it up into platforms, and, you know, maybe give them some suggested copy they can use. Obviously, the buy link, or the proper buy link for the book. And I always tell them, look, this is a suggested timeline. You don't have to follow this by the book. If you want, you can, but this is just a preamble on a good way to break up your promotion, 2 to 3 months out. And for authors who don't have a large following or one at all, I'm honest with them. You're not going to become an influencer overnight. Hardly anyone is. And sometimes, it's just better for them to spend their energy elsewhere, networking maybe, instead of trying to build Rome in one day. And I think for a lot of authors, a great way to use their social is that networking, jumping on hashtags, jumping on, trending topics, interacting with authors they love, authors who are in their same genre, authors who they want to, build a relationship with. And, if they still want to build a profile, again, letting them know it's not going to happen overnight, and that's okay. I do like to share best practices with them. How often is a good time to promote on each platform, because each platform is different. You probably won't post as much on Instagram as you do on Twitter, and you probably won't do as much on Facebook as you do Instagram, just little things like that. And then, again, how to engage with other people, how to gain more followers, things like that. But, it's really down to self-promotion, and a lot of authors just want to know how to get over the awkwardness of that, and that's what I like to help them and guide them in.
Can I piggyback on something Leila said? Okay. What she said something that jumped out, and it's like, you're not going to be an influencer. And I feel like this is so key, that like, with maybe some minor exceptions, most authors, you're not on social media to be an influencer, right? You're not going to like get sponsored by green smoothies and HelloFresh and all of these things, right? You're there to nurture a relationship with your readers. So I'm frankly like way less concerned with your follower count, with all of those things. And what Leila said is so important, that it really is about networking to reach new people and get in on the conversations that are already happening online. But it's also a place to nurture your readership. So when someone picks up your book because they heard you on a podcast or read the New York Times book review, probably you're writing maybe a book a year, if that. And so there's a lot of space in between books. And so if a reader can read your book, love your book, and then connect with you and stay in touch with you in between books, it's going to be a lot easier for them to be primed for the next one. And so I think if we switch our thinking between like, you're not going online to be an influencer or a YouTube star, you're not trying to get sponsors, you're really going there to network, and as a way to potentially nurture your current audience. And that's why I tell authors, like, we can spend time nurturing your following online, but it's even more important that we're working with, like, if your audience is on TikTok, we're working with book talkers to tell them about your book. If your audience is on Instagram, we're pitching bookstagrammers to tell them about your book. And so I think changing that mindset, people are very concerned about followers and growth and all these things, but I care less about how many people are following you and more about how many people are talking about your book.
So Dana, I'd like to ask a question about social media outsourcing. Often authors wonder if they can kind of farm this out to someone else. And you, of course, mentioned VAs earlier. What do you think?
They can. I mean, anyone will take your money and do things. So we have done social media and I know a lot of agencies who will do social media for people. It is not the same as the author doing it themselves. It's not working. It doesn't work as well. You can't get the right engagement. It feels like a little bit of an arm's length away. And really the point is to nurture your audience. And so it's really difficult to nurture your audience with a VA. And I have a creative writing background. I can parody an author's voice really well. It's still not quite the same. And so I think that I would rather have someone say, I'm going to do one platform and that's it, than hire someone to do like 5 platforms for them. That's not to say like we create some video content, we'll take pretty photos with the tea and the socks and all the stuff, and but ultimately the author should write the caption. We can recommend hashtags. So I think working with someone that's a little bit more of a partner versus just farming it out and not looking at it. And I do think the same is true. Even we handle social media accounts for a few of our publishing clients. And even that's really hard to like capture the moment, like at the time we're not in the office, so like I can't, it's harder for me to like do the unboxing video or a tour when an author comes to visit and those sorts of things. So I think anytime you can have your in-house, whether that in-house is a publishing company or an author themselves, that's preferred.
Thank you. So I want to do a little bit of what I'm calling the lightning round on very specific tactics that some people use, other people don't. The question is kind of like, do you consider this alive and well? Is it dead? Or who is it good for? I'm looking for short answers, and then maybe we can expand in certain areas if we find some interesting touch points. So the first one is paying for social media influencers to talk about your book, like on Instagram or TikTok. And I'll start with Leela.
I'm not a fan. Usually when there's a paid aspect, you'll see a hashtag that'll say like partner or sponsored or, and it's not real. And you want to be real, and hopefully at this point you've built a community on social media, and then they're seeing this, person who's not really related to your book touting your book. I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea.
Vishali?
I disagree. But I agree with Lila's point in that like oftentimes it can come across authentic. I think it's hard to do right, but when done right, it can be effective, because I think so many people I know, when they're looking for books, it's through Instagram ads or they're scrolling through social media. And if they see a pretty photo, they might look into the caption. If the caption is engaging and it's targeted towards the audience that they're like, catering to, then something can click and can help someone read the book, and that'll help like with word of mouth, etc. So I don't think it's like the end all be all, but I do think it's like a good point to kind of kick off the conversation. But I do think you have to be very mindful about who you're working with and if they have good engagement and if their audience is, interested in, the book that you're writing.
Dana, tiebreaker?
In the middle. So I think the key difference here is that there's a key difference between journalists and content creators. And so a lot of the influencers are considering themselves journalists, like they write blog posts, they report, they review. And so I don't believe in paying for reviews. Like I think that there's something fundamental, not just icky about that. But content creators, I do believe should be compensated. So the times where we do paid partnerships with influencers is when they're creating some sort of content or curating a conversation. So we've paid to YouTubers to hold a book club and then have a conversation about the book. They're creating that content for us. We're using that content in our marketing. So I view it as compensation for their creation, their artistic process, versus paying for reviews. And so to me, that's kind of the line we dance, is that we're not going to pay influencers to review the book because it's not going to be honest, but we will pay for, if they want to do like a read along or facilitate, just as moderators and panelists will get paid to lead a panel and lead a program. If they're going to lead a read along, a live Q&A, if they're going to moderate something, we'll compensate them for that.
Excellent. Okay, now I'm going to go in reverse to try and make this fair. So we'll start with you, Dana. In-person book signings at bookstores. Yes. Right now.
Maybe. If you live in the South. I mean, I'm being flipped, but like that's actually what we're seeing from our end for booking events, is that if you're in the South where COVID protocols are a little looser and there is more of a chance of having things outside, we've had a lot of great in-person events in gardens, out in fields and things that have worked really well. And then up here, I'm in Chicago, where lots of bookstores are even closed to browsing, let alone an event. So I think all of us are dying to get back in person. And I think this might be a return to in-person bookstore events once everything has calmed down a little bit.
Vishali?
I agree with Dana. I think it depends place by place. I think, if I was in Phoenix, for example, just now, it's beautiful out. So if you're doing an event there and it can be outdoors, I think, that's great. But I think like in the Northeast, it is 32 degrees. And I think most events are indoors and people might not feel or likely will not feel safe doing like an event with like a lot of people, and rightly so. So I think it really varies place by place. But that said, I think most publishers are keeping like health into account, and as are like indie booksellers as well in general. So I think it's going to be a gradual return to, signed events, just because I think there's such great moments for like fans to actually meet the author and to have like genuine interactions. But I think it's going to take a minute for us to get there and back into full swing again.
And Leila.
Yeah, so I think they're so valuable, but I mean, the time that we're in, Dana and Vaishali both mentioned COVID. So right now what we're seeing is we're not seeing a lot of signings right now. A lot of bookstores aren't doing them. And so what we've been doing is we've been kind of pivoting and having our authors just reach out to their local indie and do, offer stock signing, go in, sign some books. That way the bookstores can do a sign a book promotion without getting a crowd together. Also secret signings where authors sneak into a bookstore and sign a book and like come to so-and-so bookstore and see if you can find the signed book on the shelf. Those are really fun too. And just in general, just going to your bookstore and just your local indie and supporting them on social media, we found those things to be just as valuable. And then you have this relationship with this bookstore so that once we get out of COVID, your next book comes out, here's a great place that you could have a non-COVID book signing.
So let's talk about video trailers for your book, and I'll start with Vaishali on this one.
Sure. So I think video is the future. It's already happening now. I think video trailers are great. That said, I don't think authors should always feel like the onus is on them. Oftentimes, like publishers will help with that process, or at least it's good to check in if they have the bandwidth to do that, because it will vary, like, in a case-by-case situation. But I think they're great. We see really great engagement from them. The one thing I do recommend is that attention spans are short, so you really don't need like a minute trailer or even like a 30-second one. Oftentimes, like even like a 15-second one or like 7-second kind of like short clip will do the trick. And it could just be like short, punchy, show the book cover, a little bit about the book, a tagline if you have it. And usually that's enough to like, pique someone's interest, and then you can lead them to the landing page where they can find out more, or to your author page.
And so is that something you would consider ideal for sharing like on Instagram or TikTok or?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, I think it varies on TikTok, because on TikTok, like ads don't work if they're like very overt, like what works is something that's like very relatable, almost casual. But I think on other platforms, it's great to post like a trailer, especially if you can make something in like a format that's like usable in various places, so that way you're getting more bang for your buck. We usually like to use like a square format because you can put it on like Facebook, on Instagram stories as well, which is usually vertical, but like you can do square there. But it's great to optimize per platform. So if you are able to do like a vertical for Instagram stories, that will look better. But at the end of the day, I think just like video tends to catch people's eyes, like, and just like motion graphics in general versus like your standard kind of book graphic, which I think everyone has seen, and your eyes kind of glaze over. But I do think that like, you have to kind of cater to your platform. I think if you're making something for TikTok, you'll have to kind of approach it in a different way. But I think if you're doing like a traditional, like, standard like book video, you should be fine to share on like normal platforms like, Twitter, Instagram stories, and so on.
Dana?
I'll keep it short. Trailers work for movies, not books.
Oh, laying down the gauntlet. Leila?
I'm in the middle here. I love book trailers, especially if they're very evocative. And of course, your marketing team should be the one doing it. I will also say that, short is key. And one more point, I've seen video ads on Facebook. They do really well. they get a lot of engagement. And so if you're going to make a video and you're going to make it nice and short and sweet, you want to put some ad dollars behind it, you could probably see really good, referral rates if you do it on Facebook. Not guaranteed, but just, throwing it out there.
Sure. I'll add my 2 cents on this, which is I see a lot of authors attempting to make their own book trailer with not so sophisticated images and software. And I think that's where it really fails. But then there are other people who are very talented at putting together those Instagram reels or stories. And it seems beautiful and like an amazing idea. Okay. Instagram book tours. We'll begin with Leela.
I think they're a good use of time. This is where I mentioned earlier, this is that community building that comes into play when you're promoting your book. And I think it's really exciting and fun to see, a group of 6 authors, one by one, promoting each other's books. I've seen that happen, and it's just lovely to see that, just that mutual support and love and fangirling. So I think that's a really good use of time. I think also Instagram book tour with Bookstagrammers is also a good use of time. I'm still a believer in word of mouth. And I think that's, the way that we get to see it now.
Vishali.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. I think it's great to have like a support, like a community that's like, signal boosting each other. I think it helps drive engagement, especially if you have like a hashtag that you're using for like the tour. So that way, if someone clicks on it, they can like find out, what everyone else is saying. I also think it's important for these tours, to have some sort of like ask. So like that way, people can kind of answer with their own words. I think oftentimes where you see like a book tour fail is like if everyone is just regurgitating like the same old book copy and not really adding anything original to it, which is why I always like to ask a question like, who would you recommend this book to? Because I think it kind of, makes it a little bit more engaging for like the audience as well, and for like the person who's posting it, and it kind of helps it feel a little bit more personal and a little less like someone copy pasted it from like the publisher website.
Dana.
Yeah, I think they don't hurt, and I think that it's a really great option for authors who maybe want to dive into the Instagram market but don't want to do the legwork to like research the influencers and pitch and do all those things. It's kind of a turnkey, quickie option. But like most things that are turnkey and quickie, they're not as impactful. It's more impactful though than like not doing anything. And so if your publisher is not going to do anything on Instagram, anything with influencers, and that your readers are there and you have a little bit a smaller budget but not a lot of time, then I think it's a more economical option.
Blog tours. We'll start with Dana.
Can I just say no?
No.
Nope.
Vishali?
I'm also skewing towards no, but I love bloggers. So I don't want to give them like, I don't want to discredit them, but I do think that like nowadays, just the reality is people aren't going to like individual blogs to get news. I think they're looking for content aggregation, and that's happening on social media platforms. So that's not to say that like, it's blog tours are over, but I do think that like blog tours work when they're amplified on social. Mm-hmm. So I think, if you have like I said, like some sort of common hashtag connecting everything, and you're promoting on Twitter and like reposting there, and, tagging the person whose blog it is, the author, the, cover artist, for example, anyone who's like involved, where it makes sense. I think that's a really great way to kind of, boost the blog tour. So I think yes, but with like, the social aspect, I think that's extremely crucial these days.
I'd like to amend. I no to blog tours, but yes to bloggers. I think kind of what Vishali was saying is like, I love when bloggers, we send to bloggers. I love when they review our clients' work. They do a Q&A, all of those things. We love working with bloggers. It's like Vishali said, it's that cookie cutter, just throwing the same Q&A, the same excerpt, the same giveaway post everywhere that I'm not a fan of. Yeah. Before the bloggers come after me, we love bloggers.
Leela, anything to add?
Totally agree. Everyone's going to social for updates and reviews and blogs. And Sometimes that even calls into question whether an author should have their own blog. I mean, they're doing all their updates on social anyway, and that's where I'm gonna go to see when your book's gonna come out. So yeah, I'd say maybe not.
TikTok. And who do I want to start with? Let's start with Leela.
Well, I think it depends on the book that you want to promote, or your brand. So some of our, 65-year-old thriller authors TikTok might not be the best fit for them to do a little dance with their book. But say, a cookbook author, TikTok recipes are huge. And that's where I'm getting all my food inspiration from, is social media now. And also, if it's a younger age category, then I can see it working. So it's not I just want to say it depends.
That's acceptable. Vishali.
I agree. I think it also depends. I think the key factor is it really depends on your book, but also very much your audience that you're kind of catering towards. And this is where I think the retrofitting comes into play. I think a good thing to do before you really invest in a social media platform and putting your time and effort into making content is to kind of, take a scan, see what everyone else is doing. TikTok, it's very niche. As anyone on TikTok knows, you can get into very specific, the algorithm will take you places. But on Book Talk, there's so many different realms, and I feel they're kind of growing every single day. So I think, predominantly, it was YA, and there's I think someone mentioned in the comments, it's a great place for romance, for example. But I also have seen a big teacher community on TikTok, and, for children's, for example, teachers who work with middle schoolers. So I feel there's room there to explore, but you kind of have to see, who you're talking to first before you start making content that you think will resonate. So, and also if you're up for making that type of content too, I think TikTok, it's a very different from Instagram, which is very it's simpler almost in a way to Instagram, because you're not doing video and transitions and things like that. And with TikTok, as anyone on TikTok knows, if you're not engaging within the first 2 seconds, people will swipe by. So you kind of have to know the vibe of TikTok, which is constantly changing as well, and within the TikTok community that you're part of. So I think if you understand that and you think your audience is there, then I think it's a worthwhile thing to consider doing. And from what we've seen, TikTok tends to grow faster than other accounts. But to I think Dana's earlier point, I think the goal should not be to have 1 million followers. The key thing is engagement. One thing I always like to remember is if anyone's heard of the idea of 1,000 true fans, you always want to aim for just 1,000 people who really, really like your stuff. And if you have that in mind, that can help kind of curate your content a little bit more and what you're putting out there.
Yeah, echoing what Vishali said, is I think if we can invest more time in reaching out to TikTokers who could talk about your book more and reach into these niche communities. Obviously, the book talk world is huge, but we've also had success, like Vishali said, with our children's authors, teachers of TikTok as a whole community. We had a book about, we had a COVID book. We reached out to doctors of TikTok who are all trying desperately to get people to listen to science. So they really wanted a tool to help give people. And so reaching out to those communities, but not every author needs or should be doing little dances and voiceovers and things like that on TikTok. I think the focus can be simply pitching people who could talk about your book.
I just want to quickly add one thing too, is that it's evolving and growing. So month over month, whatever is trending, it's going to be something totally different a month from now. And so, yeah, if you want to make TikTok a part of your, personal marketing strategy, then do as much research as you can and stay on top of those trends.
Excellent. An author's Facebook page, and here I'm really thinking about the business page, not the personal profile, but if you want to comment on either, that's fine. We'll start with Vishali.
I recommend, if you're interested in having a Facebook presence, like definitely have a business page, just because it helps for us, like when we're tagging you in our posts and things like that. If we're ever doing like shared posts, it's just easier to engage with a business page than like a personal page. Also, you want, I think, followers, like, readers coming to your business page versus like your personal page. I feel like it's better to keep those two things separate. So I think, there's definitely room there. The one thing I will say with, a Facebook business page is, like, if you have one, just make sure, you're posting regularly enough. If whatever you're posting, like, make sure that there's like, you're catering to like towards the audience that you're posting for, and that there's like regular engagement. I know what a lot of people do, since like Instagram and Facebook is like the same company, is that they'll cross post their Instagram post onto Facebook. So that's kind of like an easy way to kind of just have continuous content, like build your SEO. And it's kind of like low key and like, low effort. But it's helpful to have a Facebook page, I think, in particular, if your publisher is active on Facebook and if they're tagging you in posts there, because then you can reshare those on your channel. So I think in that case, it's really useful. But that said, I don't think it's a must. I do think it's like a nice to have. Unless, I think Dana was mentioning this earlier, if you're running ads, or if you're interested in running ads, if you have a business page, that makes it easier to do that on the back end.
Dana.
I don't think I have anything to add to what Vishali said. I agree that you need a business page. I also think that if you're like some of us who don't care for Facebook, you also don't have to be on there. This is
Excellent.
my permission.
Thank you. Thank you. One less thing to do. Leila.
I'm in the middle of both. So exactly, if you don't need to be on Facebook, and you don't have time for it, or that's not where you want to build your platform, that's fine. But having a business account really helps if you wanted to play around with your own advertising and targeting. And then it also would help the publisher, because if you have a business manager account and you make us an admin, we can run the ads and pay for them and just use your profile as if it's ours. So pretty much I'm in the middle.
Well, and I think there's a common misconception among authors that a personal profile is going to get more views, and so they don't want to go to a business page. And I think that because there's no analytics, you can't know for sure that it's getting more views. It might feel that way, but it's really hard. As a marketer, I want to know analytics. I'd like to know who's engaging with what type of content, when are they engaging, all those things. And you don't get that on a personal profile. So if you are going to do Facebook, it should be a business page, because otherwise you won't get access to those analytics and you won't know what type of content is working.
That's a great point. Thank you. Okay, so I have one more thing I want to discuss as part of this lightning round, and then we're going to go to the Q&A box. So I've left this for the end because it's a pretty big topic, and I thought we might end up running a little bit over. There's a lot of questions already stacking up on it. It's the author email newsletter. So obviously these things take a long time to build out to meaningful numbers. So maybe you can advise on if it's worthwhile to start one, if you consider it essential, or maybe. And I'll begin with Leila.
I think it is. And, I keep saying these two words over and over, community building. I think it's worthwhile. I don't think it's something that you need to do before your book comes out. Like, it's your first go, this is your debut book, and you're already so overwhelmed with everything that comes with it. But maybe start thinking about it closer to publication. Now, if you're on book 2, book 3, and you've already have an email list, and it might feel small, use it anyway. Use it to promote book 2, use it to promote book 3. There are ways that you can use certain platforms like Facebook, like other social platforms to build that subscriber list. And I'm not going to give all the secrets away, but you can do some lead generation ads, let's say, just to get people interested in you and subscribe to your newsletter. I would just say, again, if it feels small, use it anyway. If you don't have one at all and you're going into your first publication, maybe wait until you start building that community and making those contacts as you get closer to publication, and start putting them into your subscriber list, and then you can go from there.
Vishali.
I think agree with Leela. I think it's definitely something that you can do if you have the bandwidth, because it does take like time and effort. But that said, it's a great way to build community. It's like a direct way for people to kind of get updates in their inbox. And people are doing tiny newsletters as well. So I feel like, you know, a newsletter doesn't really have to be a chunky thing that's like really meaty with a lot of things. You can have like a couple updates, and you could figure out what cadence works best for you. It doesn't need to be a weekly newsletter. It could be like monthly or bi-monthly. As long as it has like valuable info for like, you know, the people who signed up for it, I think that's great. And I think, you know, you can look at like examples of other author newsletters as well, and kind of see, you know, what parts you think would be engaging for your readers, and kind of like do a mishmash of those. But I do think it's like a useful way to kind of reach out to readers and fans, and have them connect with your story, and also like let them know that like, you know, my book is available for pre-order, like, or we're doing like a special like, you know, event here and things like that. So I think it's a useful way to share info. But yeah, I really think it just comes down to like figuring out like the cadence of like the newsletter as well. And then the other tip I would just give is like, if you are doing like newsletters, I recommend not doing them on like Mondays and Fridays. Monday, everyone is catching up on their inbox, and it tends to get like kind of buried. Usually I found that like Tuesdays to like Thursdays tend to be like have the best open rates. So just a little tip for anyone who's considering it.
Unless you're Jane Friedman, who sends on Fridays.
Oh no, sorry, Jane.
Do I?
I'm sure you get great.
I'm pretty sure. I remember reading Electric Speed on Saturday mornings. So I think you send on Fridays.
It goes out at 5 a.m. on Saturday.
Oh, well,
yeah. Dana, what do you think about email? I think you're a fan.
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
I could geek out on email all day, but it's a lightning round, so I'll keep it short. So I think the thing is that I firmly believe you can write newsletters that you love to write and that your readers love to read. I think authors are really jaded of like, I hate getting author newsletters, like, because a lot of authors don't do them well. And so of course, you don't like getting spammed every time your author friend has a new book out. Like, that's natural. I didn't sign up for an advertising in my inbox. So I believe in serving your audience and giving them really interesting and fun content, and that you'll probably have more fun writing anyway. And so I think that it's really clear that if you are enjoying writing the newsletter, your audience will also enjoy reading it. And it can be part book promotion, but it can be also part insight into your life, insight into writing process. It could be just fun little anecdotes. But I think with consistency, not just with, shall I said, in the frequency, but also consistency in the type of content. So Jane, you mentioned James Clear, who I'm a longtime subscriber. He has a 3-2-1 every week. It's 3 ideas from him, 2 quotes from others, and 1 question. That's his format. It comes in every week. Jane's newsletter, I know there's going to be a little article from Jane, some roundup of links, some user-generated or subscriber-generated content. And so I know what to expect. So I think teaching your audience to know what to expect. And then the other thing to remember, I could go on and on. The other thing to remember is that, you send monthly newsletters, but new subscribers. So if I subscribe to your newsletter today, I didn't get any of those. All those other newsletters you sent, I didn't get. So what we've been working with a lot of our authors to do is create an automated sequence we call a nurture sequence. And so we take the emails that are more evergreen, meaning it's not like, hey, we just vacationed in Australia. It's more evergreen content about the process of writing, what inspired the series, background, like before you became a writer. That evergreen content we've been putting into an automated series so that people, when they subscribe, they'll get either a weekly or a bi-weekly email that's sent to them automatically on the basis of when they subscribe. So you're kind of catching readers up. And this is particularly powerful for people who write series. This is really powerful because if you're on book 8, they missed a lot. So there's a really good opportunity to catch people up. And then for nonfiction authors, it's a really good opportunity to kind of get buy-in on your topic. So in theory, your book is a thesis of some sort, like you have a hypothesis of like, I believe this, and a welcome sequence can really get users up to speed on what they need to know, like before they dive into the book, or why your topic is important. And so I'm a big fan of not just newsletters, but automated newsletters, or automated email marketing. And I know there's probably, 655 heads that are like, oh God, that seems like a lot, but it really is super basic in most MailerLite, MailChimp, if you pay for it, Active Campaign. They even have like recipes, some of them, of like, here is a nurture sequence. And really you just take the newsletters you already sent and plug it into into an automated sequence and just say, wait 1 week, send this email, wait 2 weeks, send this email. And it's not set it and forget it. You should monitor what emails are going out, but it's a really nice thing for authors who have created a lot of content and are maybe getting burnt out on sending weekly or biweekly or monthly newsletters, that they can create a nurture sequence that will not only catch people up, but will help continue their email marketing, even if they're not actively sending.
As someone who's sent out newsletters since roughly 2010, I can say it's hands down the most powerful marketing and sales activity I engage in. Like, there's not even a competition. But it does take, time and thoughtfulness, but I think the rewards are tremendous. I think an email newsletter, I'll just get on my soapbox here for a moment, is like one of the best insurance policies for your career, because you can just keep going back to the people who love your work without having to rely on social media or Amazon or anyone else. But of course, it takes time.
Remember that time when Instagram went down for like a day or two? And all those people who had ads running and had campaigns running, like, were just done. Email was still working. So you could have been like, a lot of people, I bet, wish they had their email list.
Okay, so I'm going to barrel through as many questions as possible here for about 10 minutes. We'll probably just take one answer unless someone really has like, oh my gosh, I have to chime in on that. We have a question about best practices after publication. So like 6 months out, 12 months out, what do you suggest? Who wants to handle that one? Just jump right in. Dana?
Okay, I'll do
or
it.
Leela? Okay, yes.
I think because I think there might be, I'm sensing a little anxiety in the group, because usually 6 months after you've moved on to the next title and your author's like, hold on, get back to me. What are we still doing about this book? And sometimes you can feel like you did everything you could up to publication day. What I like to do, and what I like to encourage my authors to do, is, again, continue networking on socials. Get together with your author friends, hop on each other's Instagram lives, do an Instagram live party. Do an Instagram live where you're reading from, samples of your book, do a live signing, things like that. Get on social media and use that time and your platforms to continue promoting yourself. If people are reaching out to you to partner or, want to read your book, work something out with them. Just keep on building that community. I'm going to keep saying that. Keep on building that community, building your reader base, and making more friends in the industry and within your author network.
Wonderful. Book marketing, it should not be a solo enterprise. Robin asks, what is the author's responsibility for bringing in praise from big name authors? So the blurbs that go on the book or on the ARC sometimes.
I can jump in. I think if you have any connections, definitely let your editor know, because they'll be reaching out for blurbs pretty early in the process, especially if there's a chance that they can share one of them on, the ARC or Galley or anywhere within the pre-pub kind of like marketing and sales materials. But usually like the onus, I believe, of that usually lies with like the editor. It's great to know. They'll love knowing if you have contacts. That's usually very helpful, but usually they know there's like folks that they can reach out to as well about getting praise and things like that.
Jan asks, can you tell us about how far in advance of book launch those pre-order links appear? And is publicity in high gear when those pre-orders are available?
I'll jump in with this one. It depends. I want to say it depends on a retailer. When I was at Random House, usually we would have titles feed out to retailer sites. I want to say 9 months in advance. Other publishers do it other ways, so it depends. But it's, you know, usually when your book is a particular amount ahead of publication, it's all the bugs have been worked out. You're nearly ready to get your galleys. So I would say 8 to 9 months.
A question from Sarah, and this might be ideal for Dana to answer, but I don't know. We'll see. She's asking where publicity budgets come from. You know, does the author contribute to the publicity budget, especially around social media content? Obviously, we've talked about how some authors hire publicists, but maybe, you know, and that has a significant cost associated with it. But I'm not sure that authors would actually fork over money to a publisher, but maybe they do for publicity. Who Dana?
So I think, so I would say, and Vishali and Leela, I've never worked in Big Five, so I can't say. My instinct is that if your publisher is asking for money, that feels icky. And so it's probably a red flag of some sort. But they, however, might say, we have worked in situations where the publisher and the author have both contributed to our fee. So an author wanted to hire us. They're saying, I'm going to ask it's usually with academic presses or smaller presses that they'll say, let's see if my publisher has a budget. We have sometimes done that with Big Five where they worked it into the advance or the contract that like, I have K publicity, they're coming with me as I move houses, and please factor that in. But I think that when it comes to budgets and time, I think Leela spoke to, you know, you have 25 books a year, various seasons. I think your advance oftentimes is a good indicator of how much attention and time the in-house team is going to have. And so if you get a sense in the beginning when you have your kickoff call that you aren't maybe getting the support that you want, or as much as you want, then I think you'll have to hire an outside publicist. But the publisher shouldn't like be charging you for publicity. That is probably a hybrid press model or a independent paid self-publisher model. But I will say, just because I don't feel like we talk about money enough, hiring a publicist is going to range. I've had publicists say they charge 25 bucks an hour. I have a friend who charges 10K a month minimum, with a minimum 3-month engagement. Like, it's a huge range. For our firm, most book campaigns are $8,000 to $10,000, depending on the scope of the work. So that's how much you can think about that you might need to invest.
Oh, right. Christy wonders, how are lead titles selected? And Dana, you mentioned the size of the advance might play into that. Does anyone want to handle this issue?
I can jump in, but it's usually it's a variety of factors. Some of it depends on, you know, like the author profile. Like if, for example, if it's a celebrity book, it, you know, based on that social media platform, it gets a certain kind of marketing plan, versus, you know, other kinds of stories. It really depends also, like, you know, what our sales team is seeing in like the market and what they see is resonating. So usually like forecasts are determined by like what sales is predicting, like how well that they can sell in the books to their accounts. And then depending on that, typically we get like a marketing budget that we work with. Because marketing, as we know, is like, you know, we help sales. So in that way, you know, it's a variety of things. But of course, at the end of the day, I think, you know, the read also like matters so much. You can really tell when folks are excited about a book internally, because like, you know, we're talking about it in meetings. People are saying like, did you read this yet? Like, it was fantastic. So like a lot of like in-house buzz happens as well. And then of course, like some titles just take like a little bit to build. Sometimes like titles come out the gate, you know, they make a splash, but then over time, like, you know, the buzz grows, the readership grows. And when that happens, the marketing also grows as well, to kind of keep the momentum going. So it really depends. I know that we answer a lot of questions like with it depends, but it depends on like a lot of like factors. And also I think the other thing is like, if we're doing a book that is like centered around like a certain like theme or like something that's like especially timely, I think that will also contribute to like, the marketing support and things like that. So for example, we do like year-round promotions for, moments like Pride Month in June, and then like, other moments like throughout the year. So those are always opportunities where we can kind of like slot in books and like help in with marketing, because sometimes like, we might have like dedicated budget for like certain titles, but we'll also have budget to do like group promotions and things like that. So anytime we can slot in books into promotions for like Black History Month, Women's History Month, that's another way for books to kind of get like, a level up that you might not see like reflected in like, the book to book marketing, but like it is getting support in like other areas throughout the year. So there's like a long-term and like long tail level of support.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to segue to our final question here. All authors, at least the ones I know, have a limited budget, sometimes no budget. They're often confused as to how to use the resources that they do have. They're scared of wasting time and money. And of course, there are a lot of mixed messages out there about what actually works. And there have been differing opinions, right on this panel, case in point. And then the tools keep changing. TikTok has a vibe that keeps changing. There'll be a new TikTok probably in a few years. So can you offer some parting advice on dealing with kind of this challenge, on how authors can make the best decisions for themselves? And I think I'm going to start with Dana.
Publicity is free. I think that if you have, it's the analogy I use, like when I was in college and I didn't have any money, I cleaned my own house. I was not an expert cleaner, but that's what I can afford. So I did it myself. It wasn't great, but it was better than just sitting in the filth. And, if you're an author at the very beginning of your career, or you have different financial obligations, you might not be able to hire the pros. And so you're going to do the best you can with what you've got. And I didn't go to school for PR. I didn't work at a big publisher. I learned how to be a publicist on my own in real time by trial and error and making contacts and networking. I firmly believe authors can do the same. And so if you don't have the budget to do Facebook ads and hire a bunch of people, contacting, your local paper, a podcast you love, bookstagrammers, all of that is free. It might cost you to send a book. A lot of them have like Galleys anyway, so it could cost you nothing. And so I think that if you can have a robust campaign with spending no money and putting in a little bit of time.
Vishali.
Oh, there's so much. It's hard to distill it down. But actually, I think at the end of the day, like, it really comes down to like community and like building a community around your books. So I feel like if you keep that in mind and like your readers in mind, that can help inform you on your journey. I think events like this are really great where you can kind of like, get answers to your questions. I also think you shouldn't be afraid to ask your publisher questions. Some of them have like FAQs that help, kind of like get you a lay of the land, and then you can kind of prod deeper as needed. But I think like, don't be afraid to ask questions. I think it's great to also talk with other authors in your community to kind of see what their experiences have been, if there's like room for partnerships or like, just learning from each other. I think authors obviously know best about what it's like behind the scenes being an author. So I think anytime you can talk to an author that's like, published like a little bit before you, kind of to get their experience, that's usually very helpful. And other than that, I just think like, stay curious. It's always great to see like, poke around, like see what other authors are doing for like their newsletters or their social outreach, because I think from that you can kind of get like a couple examples of like, what's resonating not only with audiences, but with you, because at the end of the day, you're creating this content that you're putting out there. So I think once you kind of have that formula, you'll be in a better place and feel more confident, doing your promotions and getting the word out, and hopefully like, having everyone discover your delightful book.
Muted.
Thank you. Leela, I've saved you for last because you are both a marketer and you just had your book come out last fall. So I feel like you might be in a great position to speak to this.
I do want to say that, and maybe I should have prefaced it, a lot of what I'm talking about is, and some of my opinions have been based on that, being a published author with a very small press that didn't have a built-in, publicity and marketing team, but also working for a big 5/4 jury still out in that. And okay, I think, and I'm going to keep saying, building your community. I really think, take the time that you have right now. You don't have a budget, whatever bandwidth you have. It's just like Vishali said, poke around, be curious, see how other people are doing it. If you don't have a budget, that's okay. You can spend that time networking, reaching out. Look at your Goodreads profile. Goodreads it's an excellent self-promotion tool. And a lot of people don't understand that it is, but it is. They do have self-serve advertising. It's very cheap. It's very, like, sometimes 25 cents, 50 cents. I have ran some of those. But look at Goodreads. That's a great way to connect with people. I like to go into the Goodreads groups. There's so many, and say, hey, you want to do a Q&A with my author whose book is coming out? And Goodreads groups are curated based on genre. That's a great way to do it. And beyond Goodreads, Facebook groups, book clubs. Your local library likely has a book club or has people who meet there for their book club. Your local indie likely has a book club. Connect with your community, but not just online, out there in the real world as well.
Thank you, Leela. I love that message because so often people don't even do the work in their own backyard. They go straight to some kind of really gargantuan, ambitious, audacious goal. And I find that it helps you gain confidence. And it's also really meaningful when you do things locally and regionally with the organizations and people you're closest to. And that leads to bigger things. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, panelists, especially for joining us and giving your time to helping educate authors on this topic. I'm going to hand things back over to Johnny so he can do any final housekeeping here. I know that there will be a recording.
Yes, we'll send that out soon, and with a survey so you can give us feedback on what you liked, what we can do better, and future programming you'd like to see. We definitely have plenty planned for 2022, including some marketing webinars. So let us know what you want to see. To our panelists and Jane, thank you so much. It was a wonderful overview with a lot of great granular detail. I just wanted to add that in December, we did a marketing for indie authors. And while that was geared towards self-publishing, there's advice that's practical for any writer, including some nitty-gritty stuff about buying ads and things like that. So be sure to check out that as well. You can always just go to youtube.com/authorsguild and see all our videos there. And you can always email support@authorsguild.org to get in touch with us. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you, Jane, for hosting.
Thank you, Jane.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.